Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us with Designing with Empathy Using Personas. I'm Sonia Woods. I'm an accessibility consultant with World Campus Learning Design.
And I'm Matt Farley. I am also an accessibility consultant with Learning Design. Let me pull up these slides.
Okay. I think we have covered this slide. So we wanted to find out a little bit more about you. Thanks for sharing information on your role here at the university. We want to know a little bit more about what you're hoping to get out of this session today. So you can either turn on your mic and share that way or type something in the chat. Okay. You are a quiet group today, so we're just gonna.
Kathleen said she wants to know how different personas help with accessibility.
Well, that's perfect, Kathleen. That is what we are going to be talking about. Our objectives today, we're going to do a quick overview of the universal design for learning. Then we're going to share our persona creation process. Then we'll introduce you to our personas and we'll discuss a design challenge at the end. So first up, universal design for learning is an approach that is based on brain research. They have identified 3 networks of the brain. There's the affective network, which is the why of learning. The recognition network is the what of learning, and the strategic network is the how of learning. So I'm going to unpack each of those a little bit more for you. The affective network talks about multiple means of engagement. Some approaches, some ways to apply this idea are making your content culturally relevant, applying the knowledge to an area of interest. So along with that, providing a choice of topics. If you're giving students an assignment, allowing them to choose maybe from a list of different topics so they can do something that they're more interested in. And then varying how you're presenting information using tools like Yammer is another way to facilitate discussion, for instance. And the recognition is the what of learning. This is how you're presenting content. So you want to use multiple means of representation. That means if you have videos, they also have captions and transcripts, that your images also have text descriptions. It also means that you're varying the types of interaction. So there's lecture, there's group discussion, and varying options for resources by providing a book that also comes as an ebook, for instance. And then the strategic network is the how of learning. This is how students respond, how they complete assignments. So this is where you want to provide, allow them to choose their tool if that's possible, give them options for deliverables. So maybe they can write a paper, or they can make a video, or they can make a poster. And then they have different types of interaction where they're working as individuals and working as groups. So it's not a either or, it's kind of a both and. So some things are going to be easier and harder for all students. So what is a persona? A persona is a fictional yet realistic depiction of a potential user of a product. And the typical type of persona that, if people have heard of personas, is the marketing persona, which is the target user. That's kind of your average person, the middle of the road. And I've sometimes heard of people designing for the average student. And we would like to suggest today that that's not a good approach. There is no such thing as the average student. So the personas we're talking about today are called design personas, and they are to represent underrepresented users. Sometimes these are called edge cases or extreme cases. If you're familiar with design thinking, part of that process is considering the extremes, people on the margins, in order to make a better design for everyone.
So there are a few different purposes of personas, and specifically the ones that we created. Really, the main one is to create empathy in people who are either authoring, designing, reviewing courses, or any sort of web content or content in general. If you have any role in that process, I think you could benefit from these personas because it really helps to think about things in a different way, other than your own learning style or other than your own way that you consume content. Someone might do it completely different from you, especially if they have a disability that means they have to access things in a different way. So the personas can kind of generate that empathy to kind of put yourself in their shoes. Likewise, it also helps put a face on our students with disabilities. This really helps people understand who some of our students are in a way that statistics don't always come across. Often it can be hard to talk about situations with real students because of confidentiality reasons. So it's great that we have these personas that we can use to share some of these stories in a way that keeps everyone's privacy intact, but also really helps you think of the real people behind some of the design decisions you might be making. Going along with that, it really helps facilitate these kind of conversations and aid in our training efforts, whether we're talking to instructional designers or faculty or human resources or IT support or anyone. I think these can apply in all those situations. So these personas were created by a cross-unit team, including Sonia and I. We're from Rural Campus Learning Design. We're accessibility consultants. Our manager is Mike Brooks. He's the head of the user experience team. We have Anita Collier-Graham, who's the manager of access at World Campus. Ritu Jayakar, who is a UX analyst for outreach marketing, and Terry Watson, who is a disability specialist. So our process for creating these personas really started with the data because we wanted to make them as real and realistic as possible. So having Terry from Disability Services and Ritu from marketing really helped because we were kind of able to combine the data that marketing uses and the statistics Terry has of his students that he does intakes for every semester to come up with very realistic ages, disability types, locations, degree program, military status, factors like that, that all went into deciding, that made up the details of each one of our personas. The next step was finding the right image for each persona and choosing the names and their ages and all those details based on the data, like I mentioned. So we had a pretty long process finding the right picture for each person. We didn't want to choose anything that was too stereotypical, like you'll see here. We have some black and white ones. You wouldn't really want to choose those for someone with depression because that's kind of stereotypical. Or there's a few that we thought the person really looked like what we thought a blind person might look like, but that's not always the direction we wanted to go in. So we also wanted to avoid pictures where the people look like models, and we also had to consider what rights we had to use certain images. So we got stock photos that we got permission to use, and ironically, we ended up not using any of these original images that we were looking at. So the next thing we did was created a template. We used a tool called Extensio, which is a free app that you can try online, and we'll be providing you with a link to. It has a lot of different templates, and we created our own custom one for personas you can see here it kind of looks like a Facebook profile page or something like that, where you'll have the person's picture, some of their stats on the left-hand side. In the middle is really their story and like their goals. Below that we have their learning styles, and then on the right-hand side we'll have a list of their frustrations and what we call works best when, which are really kind of two ways of saying similar things, which are things in online courses that can be done wrong, that kind of are roadblocks for them, and then things that really help them work best and create a really good learning environment for them. And then finally, we just reviewed and sought feedback and revised and repeated this process, made sure we had all our copyright concerns out of the way, until we ended up with 6 different personas that the whole group was pretty happy with. So now we're just going to take you through each of these personas. Yes.
Before you get to that part, Alicia asked a question. She said, is there research where animation is better than real people faces?
Interesting.
I think, Alicia, that's a great question, and we actually don't know the answer to that. We did do a lot of, we read about persona creation, and the suggestion was to use people that look unposed, I guess. Like they look like natural people, like not so much like a photo shoot and like natural backgrounds. So we applied that. But that's an interesting question. Is an like a cartoon style drawing just as effective? That would be interesting to look into. So we're going to introduce you to our 6 personas right now and just talk a little bit about each one.
So the first persona is Shawn. He previously worked as an ER nurse at Penn State Hershey. A few years ago, he was in a car accident and he ended up losing his sight. So he can no longer be an ER nurse. So he's going back to school and taking online courses to learn a new vocation. He has a guide dog now, and he's using assistive technology called JAWS, which is a screen reader, which will read all of his online content to him. That's how he navigates on his computer. So some of his biggest frustrations are web pages with link text that just say things like click here or read more, because he's not really sure where those are going. And using his screen reader, if he hears those links read out loud out of context of the surrounding content on the page, they're pretty much meaningless to him. He needs everything from web pages to course tools to readings in an accessible format that are compatible with his screen reader and also keyboard commands, because he will use the keyboard to navigate along with JAWS. And he needs all visual content, including images and videos that have a lot of visual information in them, with a text description that will be read out loud by his screen reader. He also needs, if there's anything like complex tables, math content, those need to be coded properly. So they're not just images, they're actually real text that's read by his screen reader.
Okay, next we have Andy. Andy's a 38-year-old single dad. He works in human resources, and he's seeking a online master's degree to qualify for a promotion. He was born deaf, but he has cochlear implants. So he has some hearing, but his hearing is not perfect. He is also colorblind. So he enjoys learning online because communication is mostly in text. If there are live like web conferencing events, he would need live captioning for that, and he relies on captions for videos. Due to his color blindness, he does not like it when color is the only means used to convey information, and he appreciates good color contrast in images and documents.
Okay, next we have Linda. She has 2 kids. She lives in California, and she currently works for a veteran services organization. She's going to school right now to hopefully move into a more managerial position. And she has fibromyalgia, which she was diagnosed with about 10 years ago. And this limits her motor skills in certain ways that she can't always hold a mouse or hold a physical textbook. And some days are better or worse for her. So she has episodic pain that sometimes interferes with her ability to sleep. So she might have good or bad days where it's more or less likely that she'll be able to actually get online and actually do some of her coursework. So some of her biggest frustrations are anything that doesn't work with a keyboard, because like I mentioned, she can't always control a mouse. Anything where there's not textbooks in an accessible digital format, because she uses Kurzweil, which is a speech-to-text software. So unlike JAWS, as I mentioned earlier, this wouldn't be for someone who's visually impaired, but it's for someone who might need text in a digital format like she does, because she can't hold a physical book. Also, any courses that are designed to be very deadline intensive, or that kind of punish you for clicking on the wrong thing, or when exam times are not set up, extra time is not set up in advance, because like I said, she sometimes might be a little slower to get to things, or she might have a day where she can't work on something. So everything really should be designed in a way that she can get to it when it's best for her.
Okay, this is Phil. He's a 52-year-old Army veteran, now in business. He's very determined to get a college degree. He had a medical release from the military after being injured by an IED. So now he has traumatic brain injury, or TBI. He also has post-traumatic stress disorder and low vision. So the way the TBI affects him, it affects his short-term memory. So he appreciates being able to use transcripts for note-taking. And he also uses Kurzweil to help with reading and mental focus. And Kurzweil also includes a magnification feature. And because of his low vision, he uses magnification, and he likes to view images on his iPad because he can pinch and zoom. So he likes things that are designed to work well on mobile devices. And the PTSD means he sometimes does not sleep well. Yeah, so like Linda, he has good days and bad days. He appreciates knowing which parts of the course are required and which are optional, so that he can maximize the time when he's feeling good. And so Phil is an example of how some disabilities can occur together. So not all of our students have just one disability. And we have a number of military students.
Okay, next we have Sarah. She has depression and anxiety, and she was originally enrolled at University Park. She was overwhelmed by attending a large university, so she dropped out for a while to work part-time, and now she's going back to earn a degree online. She really likes online learning because it's a little more flexible for her, and it's less stressful in that she doesn't have to deal with as many social interactions. And unlike a lot of all of our other personas, Sarah doesn't use any sort of assistive technology or anything like that. But we just wanted to point out that someone who might have a, depression or anxiety can still benefit from a lot of these design decisions, like pages that have a lot of text and they're not broken up by headings. Course structures that have very limited flexibility, where she has to do step A before she can proceed to step B. And also when she has to do a lot of group work and doesn't have a lot of choices in how she wants to tackle an assignment or choose a deliverable. She also likes to work offline, so she can really benefit from videos that have transcripts because she can print her course pages and take those transcripts and read those at her own pace, rather than having to sit in front of a computer and watch a video.
Okay, and our last persona is Jenna. She is a 22-year-old resident student here at University Park and a state college local. She's trying to figure out what she wants to do with her life, and she has ADHD. She also uses Kurzweil that helps with mental focus, because that's, as we've said, that's a it's a type of screen reader that provides visual focus as it reads text aloud. And she likes the built-in study aids. So if you saw Terry Watson's webinar a couple days ago, he demonstrated a lot of that functionality. Note-taking is a challenge for her. So in face-to-face courses, she uses the LiveScribe pen, which will record the lecture as she's taking notes. So she likes taking some of her courses online because there's a lot less note-taking and all the course content is provided there for her. So she appreciates when online courses have consistent navigation and clear instructions for assignments. She also likes, again, like many of our personas, she appreciates good heading structure where the content is chunked, and she likes shorter videos, less than 5 minutes.
Okay.
Could I ask a question?
You may, go right ahead.
As you were going through the different personas for these students, it got me to thinking, okay, let's say a student graduates and is now employed by, let's say, Penn State or some other employer. How could something like this be transferred to a place of employment? I guess I'm kind of unclear on how that is done, or if it's done.
Well, it's interesting. We just gave a similar talk to this to some people in HR here at Penn State who are developing trainings for everyone in the university. So a lot of these same techniques can be applied. I mean, we're in the online course space, so we're thinking about how you present. Primarily, we're thinking about presenting online course content in a way that works well for everyone, but it can certainly be applied in face-to-face trainings as well. With the HR staff, we talked a lot about PowerPoint presentations and using color wisely, using uncluttered backgrounds. Is that along the lines of what you're asking?
Yeah, I just wasn't sure, like, with places of employment, how, I guess, aware, and maybe they are, I'm just not, from that side of things, how aware they might be of somebody that has a disability and the types of maybe accommodations they need. I don't know if the employee has to take some kind of action to request things. I'm totally clueless, but it just got me thinking.
Okay. Yeah, we're legally required, I think it's through the ADA to accommodate all of our employees. And we do have people at Penn State who have all of the disabilities we've mentioned. And these are from our World Campus data, our student data, but we have people at Penn State working for us with all of these situations.
And I'm sure there's some level of variance between companies out there, but and as far as students go, they are in charge of reporting that themselves. So it's definitely a conversation, and I'm sure there's a lot out there that is not reported. But like when we test tools or we develop tools in-house, we also think about that from like the authoring interface or the staff interface. So we're not just always making sure things work for the student, and we're also looking at things from that end as well, because we know, like Sonia said, we have staff with disabilities who might need something that works with assistive technology or other things like that. So I think that's something that's on our mind as well.
Okay, thank you. And I have another kind of follow-up question, and maybe you're going to address that later. Once you've developed these personas, then do you actually go out in the student population and actually test some of the things out? Because theory might not actually, follow through in an actual situation.
That's a great question. When Matt talked about the process for creating the personas, he listed the people on our project team. So we have people like Terry Watson who work with our students every day in helping them access course content and complete assignments. So all of what we put into our personas is based on real student interactions. So we are not, at this point, not testing that out. Is that what you mean?
Well, and it's hard to say because every person is going to be different to some degree. Like
Yes,
we
that's
talked about Shawn, he's blind and he's recently blind, so he's just learning how to use assistive technology, and that in and of itself might prevent a barrier for him than someone who might have been blind their entire lives and who has used assistive technology for 20 years. They might be able to do things that Shawn couldn't do. So I think a lot of these are kind of best practices that are great in the proactive process as you're designing, but you're always going to get cases of people who have their own unique needs that these lists in here are not going to cover everyone. So I think they're a good starting point, but you can take them and then adapt them as needed when people have needs that are not met by them.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to introduce the design challenge? I can put the link in the chat.
okay. You want to move to the next slide then?
I guess I can just switch to that.
Okay, so I think Matt put a link in the chat that goes to a Google Doc. On the document, we've summarized some of the main things to remember about each of our personas. And below that, we've put a design challenge for you. And we took an example of a course assignment. I can't see.
Oh.
Okay. Right. So pretend you're teaching a course, and the goal is to teach the students about the impact of the Emancipation Proclamation. The current assignment design is that students will read in their textbooks about the Emancipation Proclamation and write a 5-page paper on its impact on both the Union and Confederates between 1863 and 1868. So think back on the universal design portion of our talk. We talked about flexibility and options. And then we talked about some of the barriers for some of our students with disabilities. So what we want you to think about is how you might redesign this assignment, thinking about the different types of students that might be in your class.
And you can either type your answers below there, or if you're comfortable, just you can shout them out on your mic. Or if you're totally lost, we can just have a conversation.
Okay, so you're thinking about providing resources in different formats so that students aren't just necessarily reading a textbook. They might be able to read an ebook instead or watch videos. So that's good application of what we just talked about. Yeah, so what would an alternate version of that assignment look like? How might you change the parameters?
Someone said offer the option to submit either a video or a poster, which um, that's a great point. I think touching on Jenna and Sarah a little bit, that it's not always about the specifications, like you need 5 pages and it needs to be written. It's more about what are they supposed to get out of it, and is there a way you can reframe the assignment that's more engaging for a student who might not um, really be able to learn that in that format, or an oral presentation. Another good suggestion. Someone said break up the assignment into smaller chunks versus a 5 page paper. So that might be interesting, maybe if they're going to do a few smaller assignments over a period of time rather than the whole thing at once. And that might give them a way also to focus on different topics in each section, which could help with some people who might need to focus a little bit more on a more narrow subject because the prompt was like a pretty broad topic.
I think you guys have done pretty well in thinking about how you might change that assignment. Do you have any design challenges you'd like to discuss? Maybe something from your current work that you want to workshop a little bit.
Yeah, are you working on something and see this list right here and you're scared all of a sudden that it's not meeting these needs, um, or you have a question about like a specific persona and how you would adapt it for them?
Okay, well, we can come up with another design challenge for you, or we can end our session for today, depending on your interest.
There are a couple of people.
Okay. Okay, so Carmen's saying she's interested in how personas are developed and determined. It'd be nice to have something like this for our World Campus students generally, or even by program. So Carmen, are you saying that it'd be nice to have, like, narrow this down and even have personas related to specific programs?
Yeah, it would be, let's see. First of all, like, how did you determine, those particular personas? I mean, I think it's a really cool idea. How did you determine those particular personas? And is there a group generally that might be too large? Do you want to break down the group so that you have, kind of accurate personas, I guess, for, if you're, how many personas for 10,000 people, for instance, versus, how do you determine, what their disabilities were and, what kind of challenges they had and that sort of thing? I think that sort of thing is really interesting to me.
I think our initial goal was, and this took us longer than we expected, but we wanted to start with 5 or 6 because we thought we could cover most of the main disabilities that we designed for, or that we could apply these universal design principles to. So we tried to cover the major categories throughout those 6, and some of them have multiple disabilities. But maybe what you're asking is like we were talking about before, like you might need really maybe 10 different personas of people with vision impairment to cover all the different situations that you might encounter there. So that we started a little bit more broadly to cover the main categories, I think.
We also, when Matt described the process, he didn't say as much about the data we used. We used data from marketing about all of our World Campus students, and then we matched it with data from disability services related to how many students we have with different types of disabilities. And that's how we came up with the ages that the personas were, their disabilities, the type of assistive technology, even like we made sure that the programs we picked for them were in line. Like we actually have several hearing impaired students in our HRER program. We have a student that graduated actually that's almost exactly like Phil, our military veteran. So they're very representative of our actual students. There's certainly room for more. I mean, one thing we've realized is we don't have a student on the autism spectrum. But we didn't want to make, so we wanted to make just a few that people could have copies of. I think we provided the link to these personas so that you can take them and refer to them in your own work. And we thought 6 was a workable number. So Denise is asking if we had that same data on Penn State employees. We don't, but I think it would probably be a useful effort to gain that kind of data and make personas of our employees.
Yeah, like when we spoke with HR, we tried to alter how we phrase some of the things we talked about today in a bit more of a way that would apply to employees. So I think you could take a lot of the principles that are tied to these personas and you could use them in your own way. Like if you're not making content for students, if you're working on like a training for staff, you could, I think, take these base personas and kind of add your own spin onto them to make them work for you. And Mike also asked if there's any recommendations for software that can be used to caption videos.
There are many ways to handle captioning. It kind of depends on your situation. Is this a do-it-yourself, like captioning your own videos? One way to do that is YouTube. You can upload your video and they'll provide the auto captioning, and then you can go in and edit. There's also a tool at Penn State called Movie Captioner. I haven't used it personally, but I've heard it helps if you, like you write a transcript from which you create the video, then you can upload the transcript, and Movie Captioner, I think, will allow you to add the timestamps to it. There's another free tool called Amara that that has a similar idea. I have personally found editing on YouTube to be the easiest. You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. And if you have any questions later, our contact information is there, along with a few other resources that you might find helpful, including the full link to the personas.
And like I said, we did record this today, so I think we'll work with Elizabeth Pyatt to get that recording and the slides out to people who are interested.
All right, thanks everyone.